Welcome back to the Old Photo Vault channel. The Still Guest, Funeral Parlor, 1890. The parlor looked ordinary enough that afternoon, the kind of room where people murmured to keep the air polite. Yet in the photograph of Mr. Alden, lying stiff beneath the trimmed shroud, there is something too deliberate in the shadows along his chest. At first it seems like a wrinkle in the fabric, but the longer one studies it, the more it gathers into the pale oval of a second face. His own, smaller, turned upward in a strained, knowing expression. Visitors reported feeling watched, though no one spoke of it when Mrs. Alden was near. The frame shifted on its hook nightly, always tilting toward the hallway, and by spring, even the pastor avoided looking at the picture, claiming the dead should not be seen leaving themselves behind. The Porch Sisters, Rural Homestead, 1912. On quiet afternoons, the Cooper sisters sat on their porch, rocking as if the day itself needed calming. The photograph seems harmless at first. Two women in plain dresses, gazes steady, nothing out of order, but look long enough at Clara's skirt, and a small face forms in the folds, pale and perfectly centered, as though a child were pressing forward from beneath the fabric. Neighbors later said Clara had lost a daughter that spring, though she never spoke the name aloud. Each time the picture was hung, it shifted slightly toward the window, as if following someone outside. Visitors claimed the dress and the print sometimes appeared to ripple, and by winter, no one sat in that rocking chair after dusk. The Railway Carriage Trio, Western Line, 1904. It's the sort of travel photograph families kept tucked in an album. The women pose neatly against the polished rail car. Mrs. Ellery sits closest to the camera, composed, while her cousin Ruth pretends to read the paper as the train cools in the station. Only later did anyone notice the third figure. A dim face hanging in the doorway behind them features too still to belong to a passenger caught mid-step. Ruth insisted no one had stood there, and Mrs. Ellery began avoiding the print altogether. The conductor claimed a young girl had died on that line years before, slipping between the cars. Since then, passengers sometimes felt a presence just behind their seat. And the photograph, when rehung, kept turning toward the hallway on its own. The officer's study. Estate House, 1887. It was meant to be a dignified portrait of Captain Harland, seated among the heavy frames and inherited curios that filled his study. He'd spent the morning arranging everything just so, insisting the room spoke for the family better than he ever could. Only after the plate was developed did anyone notice the gaunt face peering from the dim alcove behind him. Too tall, too still, its eyes reflecting no light at all. Harland dismissed it as a trick of shadow, though he began keeping the door to that alcove locked. Servants reported hearing someone breathe inside when no one stood near it. The portrait itself seemed to darken with each passing week. And by autumn, the captain refused to sit in that room alone. The Stone Guardian, Manor Steps, 1910. It was an ordinary Sunday photograph. Little Anna perched proudly on the weather-worn sphinx her father loved to point out to visitors. The afternoon was bright enough that no one worried about shadows, and Anna's smile seems perfectly at ease. Only later did the family notice the figure halfway up the stair, faint, half-turned, as though someone were watching from just behind the railing. They insisted no one else had been outside with them. The housekeeper claimed the steps had been empty all morning. Anna began refusing to play near the statue, saying the boy in the picture kept whispering her name. The photograph yellowed quickly, darker than the others taken that day. And by winter, the family avoided that side of the house entirely. The Torn Photograph, City Market, 1956. It looks like a simple keepsake, the kind couples tuck into a drawer and forget. Elena holding her handbag neatly, Roberto leaning in as though the moment meant more to him than he'd said. The tear across the print seems ordinary too, until you notice the pale face lingering in the folds of Elena's skirt. Small, solemn, and far too clear to be damage. Elena swore no child had been near them that day. Roberto refused to speak about it at all. Neighbors whispered that Elena had lost a baby years before, though she never confirmed the story. The photograph kept warping at the edges, as if something beneath the paper pressed outward. And by autumn, Elena stopped carrying handbags altogether. The Studio Bride. Portrait Hall, 1895. At first glance, it is the usual wedding portrait. Stiff poses, borrowed finery, the bride's gloved hand resting lightly on her husband's shoulder. The scratches across the print seem ordinary damage from years in a drawer. But beneath the scuffs, just at the curve of her waist, another face presses forward. A woman's, blurred yet unmistakably alert, as though she were leaning out from inside the dress itself. The groom claimed he felt someone standing close behind him during the sitting, though the photographer insisted the room was empty. The bride refused to display the portrait, saying it made her feel watched. With time, the scratches grew darker, clustering around that hidden face, and by their first anniversary, they had stopped speaking of the wedding altogether. The Parlor Apparition, Winter Estate, 1902. It was meant to be a quiet portrait. Mrs. Langford arranged in her favorite chair, the winter light softened by gauzy curtains. She held still with the practiced calm of someone long used to being observed, though she later admitted the room felt colder than it should. When the plate was developed, a childlike figure appeared beside her, half-formed, bare feet touching nothing, its face turned toward her with a familiarity no one could explain. Mrs. Langford denied having children, yet she began avoiding that chair afterward. Servants claimed they heard small footsteps near the windows at night. The photograph itself grew cloudy, as if something inside it were breathing. And by spring, even the curtains seemed to drift without a draft. The Meadow Embrace, Willowfield, 1911. It looks like a carefree moment. Alice and June laughing in the tall grass, arms looped as if they had all the time in the world. The meadow behind them is soft with sunlight, nothing but wildflowers and the distant hush of trees. Yet, in the lower left corner of the photograph, a faint figure stands among the blooms. A woman's face, pale and steady, the rest of her body drifting like mist. Neither Alice nor June recalled anyone nearby that day. They swore the field had been empty, except for the two of them. Locals whispered about a widow who once wandered those same paths, searching for a lost child. The picture darkened at its edges soon after it was printed. And the next spring, the flowers in that corner of the meadow refused to grow. The Stairwell Visitor, Hawthorne House, 1893. Mrs. Carraway only wanted a portrait to send her sister, something modest. The new gaslight glowing on the banister, her hand resting just so. The photographer complained that the house felt drafty, though every window had been shut tight. When the print came back, a hazy figure stood at the foot of the stairs, body indistinct, head bowed as if listening for her step. Mrs. Carraway insisted no one else had been home, yet she began descending the staircase more quickly after that day. Servants whispered that the house once belonged to a widower who waited each evening for his wife to return. The photograph kept curling at the corners as though warmed by unseen hands. And sometimes, when the lamp flickered, Mrs. Carraway swore she heard a man clearing his throat in the dark below. The dressing room mirror, Linden House, 1901. The room appears harmless enough. A washstand neatly arranged, dresses hung with the absent-minded care of someone late for supper. Mrs. Elwood had asked for the photograph only to show her sister the new wallpaper, insisting the pattern brighten the mornings. But in the largest mirror, a blurred face seems to hover, neither hers nor the photographer's, its features soft as breath on glass. Mrs. Elwood said she'd felt watched while posing, though she couldn't say from where. Servants began leaving the door open, claiming the mirror clouded even when the fire was lit. The wallpaper soon peeled only on that wall, curling like fingers pulling back. And by winter, Mrs. Elwood would not enter the room without calling someone's name first. The burned sedan, Elmwood Street, 1954. Most mornings, the block was so quiet, you could hear screen doors sigh open, neighbors greeting one another as if nothing much ever changed. When the Parker sedan burned out in the middle of Elmwood, people stepped around it politely, saying the fire must have been electrical. In the photograph the insurance man took, smoke drifts soft as laundry steam. And in the rear window, a faint face seems to settle, too calm for the chaos around it. Mrs. Nolan said it looked like the man who'd owned the car, though he'd been taken away hours earlier. Children began avoiding that stretch of sidewalk, claiming someone tapped on the empty glass. The car was towed within the week. Still, the scorch mark never stopped widening. The broken portrait, Farmstead Yard, 1908. It seems like any family photograph. The grandmother seated stiffly, the father standing behind her, the daughter pressed close as if the camera might wander. The creases and tears across the print look like simple age, nothing more. But just behind the girl's shoulder, in the window pane, a pale face peers out. Small, sharp-featured, not belonging to any of them. The family insisted the house had been empty when the picture was taken. The grandmother crossed herself whenever asked about the window. Neighbors recalled a boy who died there years before, though no one remembered his name. The crack in the photograph widened each time it was handled. And soon, the girl refused to pass that window after dusk. The Quarry Companions, slate cut, 1914. The two men stand as if posing for a postcard, their jackets brushed clean, their tools set neatly at their feet. Behind them, the rock face rises in quiet layers, nothing unusual for a quarry afternoon. Yet, in the upper left of the photograph, a pale figure drifts against the stone, round-headed, faintly glowing, its gaze fixed not on the camera, but on the men themselves. They later said no one else had been working that day. The foreman insisted the entire crew had taken Sunday off. Older workers spoke of a boy who'd fallen into the cut decades earlier, never recovered. The photo's corner kept fading to white, spreading like frost. And the two men stopped returning to that part of the quarry after dusk. The garden stroll. Convalescent grounds, 1909. The scene is almost cheerful. Young Clara wheeled gently down the garden path, nurses chatting a few steps behind, the trees heavy with summer light. Her brother Wilhelm stands at the handles, proud to be trusted with the chair. Yet in the shrubbery behind the nurses, a lone face appears, pale, narrow-eyed, watching them with a stillness that doesn't match the easy afternoon. The matron swore no patient had been permitted outdoors, except Clara. Wilhelm later confessed he'd felt someone walking beside him, though no footfall sounded on the gravel. The photograph yellowed at its edges faster than the others taken that day. And Clara, once fond of the gardens, refused to be wheeled down that path again. The sunroom watcher, Briarwood House, 1912. The sunroom had always been Mrs. Harrow's pride. A place where the light lay soft across the rugs and every fern seemed to breathe a little easier. She stepped out onto the terrace only for a moment, holding the door as if listening for something inside. In the developed photograph, her figure stands clear, but in the curtain to the right, another form rises. Tall, blurred at the edges, its face faintly turned toward her through the gauze. Mrs. Harrow insisted no guest had been visiting, and the housekeeper vowed the room had been empty. Yet afterward, that curtain never hung still. It trembled as though someone stood just behind it. The photograph itself darkened at the top corner, shadow creeping downward. And by autumn, Mrs. Harrow entered the sunroom only in daylight, and never alone. The Gilded Bed, Rosewood Manor, 1906. The portrait was meant to feel indulgent. Madame Varenne reclining on her lavish bed, velvet draped over one arm, the carved cherub catching the lamplight. She'd insisted the room be photographed exactly as it was, every flourish of gold leaf showing. Only later did someone notice the face pressed into the headboard's curve. Long features, hollowed eyes, as if rising through the wood itself. Varenne laughed it off at first. Though she began waking at night, certain someone stood at the foot of the bed. The servants whispered the manor had once belonged to a woman who died, waiting for her husband's return. The wood of the headboard darkened along that carved line, like a bruise spreading. And Varenne, once so proud of the room, took to sleeping downstairs instead. The field portrait, border outpost, 1917. The officers wanted a simple group photograph, something to send home. Uniforms brushed, medals straight, the two nuns standing solemnly beside them. The meadow behind is quiet, a place where even the wind seemed to hesitate. But when the print was developed, a dim figure appeared between Sister Mara and Captain Dobrev. Small, stooped, its outline too thin to belong to any of them. Captain Dobrev swore he'd felt someone tug at his sleeve during the shot, though no one stood close. The sisters later prayed over the photograph, saying it reminded them of a child lost near the outpost that spring. The image grew clouded at its center, like breath on cold glass. And afterward, no one lingered in that meadow once the sun began to lower. The Garden Kiss, Willow Walk, 1913. It's such an ordinary moment at first. Lydia and Faye tucked into each other's arms, the hedges rising around them like a shelter. Their laughter, the photographer said, kept ruining the pose before they finally held still. But in the developed print, a small figure stands behind them. Child-sized, blurred as if made of mist, its head tilted toward the couple with a patient, almost expectant gaze. Lydia swore nothing had been in the garden except the three of them. Faye grew pale every time the picture was mentioned. Neighbors once whispered about a boy who disappeared near that path, never found. The photo's right edge began to fade to white, creeping inward. And by summer's end, neither woman would walk Willow Walk alone. The Ballroom Revel, Grand Astoria Hotel, 1925. The photograph catches the room mid-uproar, dancers laughing as the band blares, champagne trembling in tall flutes. It all looks perfectly ordinary for a Saturday at the Astoria. Until you notice the woman seated near the center, her dress turning faint and smoky below the waist, as if she were sinking through the floor. No one present remembered a guest in that gown. Several swore the chair had been empty all evening. The photographer complained of a cold draft, though the chandeliers burned hot. When the print dried, the woman's outline grew sharper, her gaze directed toward the camera with unsettling calm. Staff later avoided storing linens in that wing, and guests still whisper that one seat in the ballroom is always warm to the touch. The Armored Hall, Blackthorn Manor, 1904. On most days, the hall felt more like a museum than a room. Its suits of armor polished to a dull shine, the great tapestry drooping slightly from age. Mr. Elwood had the photograph taken only to show off the restored ceiling beams, proud of how the wood caught the afternoon light. But when the print came back, a faint figure stood to the left of the hearth, tall, indistinct, as though half-shaped from the shadows cast by the armor. Elwood claimed it was only a trick of grain, yet he began avoiding the hall after dusk. Servants whispered about a soldier who died on the estate long before the manor existed. The tapestry soon sagged lower, its threads tugged loose in one narrow place. And anyone crossing that room at night swore they heard footsteps fall exactly one pace behind their own. The altar figure, St. Aurelia's Chapel, 1931. Most evenings, the chapel sat in a hush so complete you could hear the old pews settle, their wood sighing like tired lungs. Father Marrow took the photograph, only to document a repaired panel behind the altar. Nothing more, he said, just record keeping. But when the plate was developed, a milky figure stood where no one had been, its shape rising straight from the marble as though pulled upward by the candle's thin light. The father insisted the chapel had been empty. Yet he began locking the doors earlier after that night. Parishioners whispered about a penitent who had died mid-prayer decades before, still waiting for absolution. And sometimes, during late mass, the candles near the altar bent toward an unseen breath. Maybe that's enough old ghosts for one night. If you made it this far, thank you for walking through these strange photographs with me and looking twice at every blurred corner and forgotten face. Tell me in the comments which picture unsettled you the most, and whether you noticed anything I didn't mention. If you have your own vintage photo with something extra in the background, describe it below. Or let me know if you'd like a future episode about it. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next collection of haunted memories. Until then, keep your old photos somewhere safe, and maybe don't look at them alone.